Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our next webinar. This is number 2 in our Club Support Hub webinar series with Football Queensland. Welcome to Steve as well. Before we get started, I would like to acknowledge the traditional owners of all of the country where we walk, where we work, and where we live, and we recognise their continuing connection to land, waters, and culture. And of course, we pay our respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. For those of you who are new with us this evening, my name's Michael Connelly and I'm Managing Director of CPR Group. And joining me this evening is Steve Connelly as well. Good evening, Steve. How are you doing?
Thank you, Michael. I'm wonderful. Thanks. I'm really looking forward to tonight's session. We've had such an awesome number of registrations, including a really late surge this afternoon, and talking all things AGMs and legal requirements, which we as self-professed governance nerds are very excited about. And I know some of the attendees are maybe secretly excited too.
Yeah, look, I think so. But I've got to say, for those of you who haven't noticed, our surname is the same because we are brothers. And I've got to say that I haven't seen a spring in Steve's step like I've seen today since I used to watch him play for Woomba or play for Budrum out in the football field. He's obviously so excited to talk about constitutions and to talk about AGMs. And as Steve said, I hope that some of our participants joining us this evening are as well. We've had a really good registration rate for tonight. We recognise that there was another meeting that has come up, so the session will be recorded. So if you miss it, or if you'd like to share everything that we go through this evening, you'll have a chance to be able to do that as well. So you'll receive a link to the resources and also to a recording of tonight's session after this evening is done. So over the next couple of days. We are now at webinar number 2 of 6 that are planned between now and October. So we're really looking forward to going through each of these sessions. And our first session last time, exactly 3 weeks ago, was on all about great club committees. So that gave us a chance to talk about governance from an introductory standpoint. And today we'll be taking that to the next level as well, focusing specifically on how to prepare for and run your AGM and some of the legal requirements that go along with that. So this evening we won't be touching on all of the legal requirements that a club needs to focus on because, well, we've only got an hour, so we'll get through that as quickly as we can. The next session is one of our favourites. That's all about money and budgets, and that's a really important one where last time we talked about the definition of not-for-profit, and we'll be really taking that forward next time and showing you how you can capitalise on what it means to be a not-for-profit business in the sporting world. Then the next one after that will be about grants and funding. And then as we get into October in the off season, we'll have a couple of more operational sessions in there as well. The idea of those ones is that it'll give you a chance in the off season to start to do some thinking and some prep into next year. Last time after our first session, we had a really good, quite a lot of interest in meeting track. So we did touch on meetings last time. Obviously tonight is about another meeting. And yes, we recognise the irony about making you join an online meeting all about meetings. So we had a lot of interest last time in Meeting Track, which is the software we've been developing, which helps organisations create a much more efficient environment around their meetings. So it takes your agenda and it turns that agenda into your minutes as you're going through. And obviously that's relevant tonight. So what we'll be doing is at the end of the session this evening, we're actually going to finish the session up. And for those of you who haven't already organised a demo, an online demo with us, we're going to run a short demonstration of Meeting Track and show you actually how the system works and then point you in the right direction. If you'd like to arrange an individual demo as well, just you can pop a note, you can do a question just to us in the questions box, or of course send us an email to info@cprgroup.com.au. Now, as I mentioned last time, we were going to run some polls, and I'd like to start this evening with our first poll of the day. The question here is, how well do you understand your club's legal process, your AGM process and legal obligations? So I'm just going to start that one and I'll go through and explain to you the answers here. So the first one is, got no idea at all. The second one, only what I've learned from other committee members. Then I think I know a little bit. Fourth option is incorporation requirements and a few other little things. And those of you who can come and take over from me if you like and join Steve, very well, I'm sure I have it right. Okay, so we're getting a fairly even sort of response as we're going through. I'll just leave that for a couple more seconds. This is always very interesting to see this spread here as well. Now, only one person has said, I have no idea at all. Now, if we were together in person, I'd give you a chocolate because it's a lovely, honest answer. And I think as humans, we tend to struggle a little bit with being able to say, you know what, I don't know. It's certainly not a weakness, and certainly not in a forum like this. It's actually a strength to be able to say, you know what? Maybe I can learn something out of this. And that's certainly what we aim to do for you this evening. So I'm going to show you these results now. There you go. So it's kind of the middle three that are accepting most of the responses there. All right, that's interesting. That kind of gives us a bit of a launching pad for where we'll be going this evening. So just as a reminder from our session a few weeks ago, what we think is that governance isn't necessarily a topic on its own. Governance is more like the hub in a wheel with lots and lots of spokes. Now, those spokes on this wheel are things, obviously your AGM is one of the spokes on that wheel. But we've also got some other topics, things like your legal obligations. Obviously, there's another one. What about asset management, event management, risk management, member protection, child protection, and the blue card? These are all spokes, and they all make up your club's governance. And your governance is basically the systems and processes that you apply that will hopefully stay with the club even when you leave. So that is governance. And governance should be the sort of thing that you can establish and then you can leave to really be able to work even after you've gone. Remember also that we spoke about the difference between governance and operations. And in this image, we don't have governance at the top because we think it's more important. Without great football and without great facilities, then we wouldn't have great clubs in the first place. The important part about this image is the line in the middle. It's the separation between governance and operations. And it's understanding that being a club president doesn't mean that I'm the person who has to go and put the nets up, and I'm the person who has to put the corner flags in, or I'm the person who always needs to be wearing the club official vest on game day. It's about understanding that, yes, we need committee members, but we don't need everyone to be on the committee. We do need lots of helpers, but not all of those helpers need to come to meetings every single month. So with that, and before we get into a little more detail on the legal obligations of clubs around the AGM, I'm going to start another poll here. So I want you to think about this as I go through this question. How many days before your AGM do you need to place an ad in your local newspaper? So I'll kick this poll off now. So it's 7 days, a week, couple of weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, or other. Let's see how this goes. Okay, so we've got a 14 days, we've got a 4 weeks coming in, quite a few there, a few more for a couple of weeks, 5 others, okay. 11, 12 now for 28 days, all right, so it looks like 4 weeks. Okay. Let's steady, just give it a couple more seconds. Any other votes before we move on? All right, so nobody thinks it's a week. A few of you think that it's 2 weeks. A couple of you think that it's 3 weeks. 14 of you think that it's 28 days, and 8 of you think that it's other. Now, I'm hoping that the people who said other actually asked the right question. I'm hoping that the people who said other said, hang on a minute, do we even need to place an ad in the local newspaper? So let me just jump back to the first question. If I can show you these results again, the first question that I asked was, how well do you understand your club's AGM process and legal obligations? Now, if you are one of the 19% of people who said that I only know what I know because it's what I've learned from other committee members, they might not be the committee members from this football club. They might be your committee members at a school P&C, at a community kindy, at a Friends of the Library or an environmental group. And we're not necessarily all on the same page. Because in actual fact, you don't need to put an ad in the newspaper. Why would the rest of the world care when your AGM is? You've only got a few hundred members at most. And they're the ones who care about when your AGM is. The broad community, they don't have to care. So the right question to ask is, do we need to do that? Or are we slipping back into that roadblock thinking that we talked about in our first session that says we do it like this because that's how we've always done it? So if you're not sure about something, stick your hand up and say, I'm not sure about this. Start a conversation about it and then look for the answer. And hopefully the answer will be in the right place, which will hopefully be your constitution, which we'll be talking about in a moment. Steve's now going to give you a quick recap of what we spoke about last time on incorporation.
Before I do that, I'm just going to give a nod to Damien, who made a comment in the chat. What's a newspaper? Very good point. Yes. And poor Josh Hobbs said, does it really need to go in the newspaper? So, no, as Michael's covered off, a
Perfect.
few others bought in as people who obviously said other and said you don't have to do it. So, spot on. Okay. So, a quick recap then on what incorporation actually is from our first session. Most clubs affiliated with Football Queensland are established under state legislation, which is the Associations Incorporation Act, 1981. In other words, you're afforded the powers of a legal entity or an individual by way of incorporation. Some clubs in Queensland affiliated with Football Queensland are still not for profit, but public companies limited by guarantee. And we'll cover off on some of the changes for companies a little later on in the discussion. But given that the majority of clubs are incorporated, we're going to talk through some of the important changes to the legislation which have come about after a 13-year gap between amendment to the legislation. So the previous amendments were passed by Queensland Parliament in 2007. And then last year in June, we saw some other important changes take effect. Some of the amendments took effect immediately, and those are on the screen at the moment, and others are rolling out over the next 12 months from now. And I just want to quickly talk you through some of these. So it's no surprise that meetings using technology are now permitted under the Act, even if your constitution doesn't expressly provide for this to take place. So typically we've seen the use of technology for management committee meetings, but not provided for in the Act for general meetings. So that is now permitted. And importantly, like I say, even if your constitution doesn't allow it. Also, the simplification of the process for winding up. So previously, if your organisation got to the end of its useful life, so to speak, and you decided to wind up as an incorporated association, it was somewhat of a lengthy process. Now it's far simpler. You don't need to get an audit. You can simply apply to OFT as long as you're up to date with all of your compliance reporting and you have no outstanding bills with OFT. You can apply simply for voluntary cancellation and you don't need to get that final audit done. Also, in relation to organisations that might be coming to the end of their useful life, management committee members of clubs that are incorporated associations now have the power to appoint an administrator to place their club into voluntary administration. Previously, this was a requirement from the courts. The maximum penalty for some breaches of some sections in the Act has been increased from 10 to 20 penalty units. And when we say penalty units, we're talking about the same penalty units that you get dished out if you get a speeding fine or fail to wear your seatbelt in the car. And at the moment, I think it's about $137 odd per unit. So the maximum penalty for breaches of some sections of the Act increased to 20 units, which is about $2,700. Then the next round of changes, which was scheduled to take place by 30 June 2021, so last Wednesday, have not yet been proclaimed by the Queensland government. So what that means is that we're going to be waiting for some time between now and 30 June next year for these changes to take effect. But it's really important for you to be aware of them. So we think that one on the left-hand side of your screen is probably one of the most significant amendments to be enacted through this legislation change. And what it does is it brings the duties of management committee members of incorporated associations into line with the duties of directors of companies, and also into line with the duties of incorporated association management committee members in every other state and territory in the country. So we've been lagging behind a little in Queensland. So importantly, the final point in that list, which is to prevent insolvent trading, means that if management committees make decisions to incur debt knowing that your club is insolvent, by which I mean you can't pay your bills as and when they fall due, then you can be held personally liable potentially for taking part in that decision. Importantly, for all of those duties, it is a defence to a prosecution to say, look, I took advice on this stuff. I took legal or professional or financial advice, and I was ill-informed. That is still importantly a defence against any of those breaches to the Act. When we talk about money and the insolvent trading consideration, Michael and I talk a lot with clubs about the fact that if their constitution is based on the model rules, it often includes a really important provision that your membership fees are set by the members at a general meeting, and often that's your AGM. So one of the concerns when you're putting one of the major financial decisions that your club makes each year in the hands of the general membership is that they might not be as well informed of the club's financial situation, and therefore that's a decision that we typically recommend should probably be made at the management committee level. I can't name any successful business that asks its customers what they want to pay for a product or service. So we'll come back to that shortly when we talk about constitutions. Importantly, you're no longer going to have a common seal. This is a bit of a bugbear of mine, whereby up until these changes take effect, you've got to have a common seal as an incorporated association, but you never actually have to use it. So that amendment will mean that you no longer actually have to have a common seal, which is typically a rubber stamp. The next really important one is that if you pay any senior staff or employees, then you need to make a declaration as to what those payments are, or any other benefits given to those employees at your AGM. You'll also need to declare any remuneration or benefits to your management committee members. So if there are benefits such as discounted or free membership for the children of management committee members, you're going to have to declare that at the AGM. And the idea of this is to instill, utmost transparency and accountability into the operations of incorporated associations. The last one there, secretary must be 18 years of age or older. That's kind of just tidying up a bit of an anomaly in the Act, whereby management committee members have got to be adults, but you can be a non-management committee secretary who's appointed, and until these changes take effect, it says individual, and now it's going to say adult. So importantly, just rectifying a little issue there. The final change then, which is expected again by 30 June next year. So that previous round of changes and this change here are all expected to take effect sometime in the next 12 months. And this one, we reckon, is centered on the fact that some grievances at the club level find their way all the way to the Supreme Court of Queensland and take judges' time dealing with nonsense from club level away from other important considerations. So your constitution is going to need to include a grievance procedure, and that procedure must provide for mediation. And there are some provisions according to which that mediation must take place. And all of the requirements of the legislation amendments are included in the Associations, Incorporation and Other Legislation Amendment Act 2020, if you're interested, which you're probably not, because you might not be as much of a nerd as me. So yes, that's a quick overview of the changes to the Act.
There you go. I told you there was a spring in his step. Thanks very much, Steve. I've noticed that some questions have been coming in as well. Hopefully we'll have time to get to some of those towards the end. If there are more questions, if you've got questions, please keep them coming in. If there are too many, then we can get through. Then Steve and I will certainly hang around and stay online to answer any of those this evening as well. So that then takes us to a discussion about the actual AGM. Now, this is something that I've always found interesting, because Steve and I get to go to a lot of AGMs and we get to meet lots and lots of people, and we see the relationships that develop between people in clubs. And it's so funny, because when they're on the sideline, they know how to talk. They can kick a ball between them. They can be working on gear. They can go and have a drink at the bar together. They can share food together. But when it comes time to actually get into the formality of the AGM, people get really awkward. Like you see people, like they kind of go, well, do we sit now? Should I stand in the corner? And I'm on the committee. Do I sit at the long table over there, or do I? And then, goodness me, when it comes time for the actual elections, have you ever noticed that at this point of the meeting, everyone becomes really interested in their shoes? Oh, look, there's a bit of a scuff down there all of a sudden, because whatever you do, don't make eye contact with anyone, and don't, whatever you do, make any gesture that looks like your hand might be accidentally going up in the air. So we'd like to dispel some of that awkwardness and some of that discomfort that goes around AGMs with some really simple steps that you can take. We do have in the handout section lots of really good resources for you tonight. And one of them is a step-by-step guide that I'm now going to walk you through with a bit more detail on exactly how to prepare for your AGM and some things that are really, really important to do nice and early so that you're always on the front foot. To do this, though, we do have to generalise, as there can be differences to how you have to run your AGM based on what's in your constitution. So tonight, for the interest of generalisation, we will focus on incorporated associations in Queensland. As Steve has just said, there are lots of similarities between us and other states, but there are some differences between the way that we run our AGMs, and particularly for companies that are limited by guarantee. So after we've been through this, Steve will give you a very quick overview. But we recognise that most of the 317 affiliated clubs to Football Queensland are incorporated associations. So the majority, if not all of this, will be completely relevant for you. The AGM is ceremonial. Therefore, it shouldn't be too long. It shouldn't be a really long meeting. The best AGM that I've ever been to was 18 minutes long, and it included us adopting a new constitution that we'd done for that club. The worst AGM that I've ever been to, and you can think about how bad your worst was, I'm hoping that this one was worse. It started at 6:30 p.m. Now, the local councillor was very polite, and he hung around sitting next to me until 10:30 p.m. I left at 11:30 p.m. after they finally reached the item of the agenda that related to what I was doing, which was presenting their new constitution, which interestingly passed without any question. So I left at 11:30. The meeting didn't finish until 1:30 the following morning. And there were, at the peak of the meeting, 30 people there. Now, that was an absolute waste of life and a waste of time. Bad meetings are usually a result of poor preparation. So we talked about that being true last time for management committee meetings, and it is just as true this time for annual general meetings as well. So let's start 2 months before the AGM. So at this point, the best thing to do is to be really well prepared, knowing that we have a date set. So this is basically the date claimer time. It's at this point that you should send out a bit of a date claimer to your members. You do. So for those of you who put that in the chat, you absolutely do not have to advertise it in the local newspaper. But your AGM needs to be within 6 months of the end of your financial year. So what that means is that when you get to looking at your constitution to work out when you have to have it, that can be a good catalyst for thinking, hey, do we actually need to change here? Because do we want to have our AGM in sometime within 6 months of, say, if our financial year ends on the 30th of September? If our financial year ends on the 30th of September, we have until the end of the following March to have our AGM. But a lot of football clubs tend to rush it. We want to have it in October because we've got to have it in October because we've got to do it before everyone rushes away to go and play cricket or go to do surf sports or go to do athletics. But you could actually wait. If you have your AGM in October, November, sure, we might catch people before they disappear to other sports. But do we have the right committee coming in to take the reins at the right time? So this is the time to think, do we want to be running our AGM just after the season's finished and maybe install a complete new committee that then has to deal with everything, all of the off-season stuff that has to happen before we can start next year? Or do we want to have our committee continue and then maybe we'll have the AGM in, I don't know, even April or May? Let's get the new season started. And then when things start to settle down, what about if we have our AGM then? Because all that means is a shift of your financial year end date, which can happen as you go through a constitution review. So at this point, and before you call the meeting, the safest thing to do is to make sure that your financials are back from the auditor or the accountant. So many times you've been to an AGM where they say, well, we don't have the audit back from the accountant yet, so we've just got the unaudited copy. You can't do that. One of the things that you must do at your AGM is presenting the financial statements and audit report or verification statement from the accountant or verifier. You can't not do that. So to call your AGM if there's any risk of not getting the financials back, and remember that a lot of auditors, particularly for the smaller clubs, a lot of auditors are either doing it pro bono or really cheaply. So therefore, they're not necessarily going to prioritize somebody who's paying them nothing, a bottle of Jameson or $300, So you've got to make sure that if you that to have your financials back, that you've got them back nice and early. The last point to make here, especially if there's any contention going on in the club, is that 8 weeks out, in the date claimer, you can put a note in there that says, if you intend to attend the AGM and you'd like to vote, please confirm your eligibility to vote with the registrar or the secretary. Now, this is really important to avoid any embarrassment, particularly if there is something like a special resolution to change name, update a constitution, heaven forbid, wind up, that people will need to come along and vote on that. And it's only members who are eligible to vote as per the relevant clauses in your constitution that are actually allowed to turn up and vote. So if there's any question, let people sort it out. Remembering that every application for membership needs to be approved by the management committee before they are actually a member. So it's not okay to turn up on the day, pay my money and say, hey, I'll vote now, thank you very much, because the management committee hasn't considered whether to accept or reject that application. So this goes into quite a bit of detail, and we're happy to explore this with you in more detail. But just keep in mind, as a little word of looking into the future, the part of the Constitution that always takes the longest and always takes the most consideration is considering membership, because it's this point that we've got to get absolutely right. So let's jump forward in time now to 4 weeks out. At this point, we've obviously got our financials back. So it's at this point now we should make sure that they are signed. So here's just a quick recap for some changes that came into effect, as Steve said, 13 years on the 13 year ago, now 14 year ago changes to the Act. Instead of every incorporated association having to have a financial audit done, it's now only level 1 associations that must under the Associations Incorporation Act, unless there are requirements under other acts like liquor or gaming licensing. So a level 1 association is one that has assets or total revenue greater than $100,000. If that's the case, then you still need to have a full audit done and presented at the AGM for receipt and adoption. A level 2 association then fits between $20,000 and $100,000. And if that's the case, you don't need a full audit done any longer, but you still need an external person to verify that your accounts are kept appropriately. If you are a level 3 organisation, and most football clubs won't be level 3 organisations anymore, those are organisations that have both assets on your balance sheet and income of below $20,000 in your financial year. If that's the case, those organisations don't need to have an audit. They still need to keep financial statements, but it's only the president or the treasurer who needs to sign the verification statement for those accounts. So at this point, at 4 weeks out, it's also a good idea to circulate the management committee nomination form. Do this nice and early. Now, what's really funny is that under the model rules, under the Act and the regulation, your nominations for election to the management committee must be received 14 days before the AGM, which is incidentally the same number of days that you need to send the notice of meeting out, the formal notice. So you kind of need to receive the nominations on the same day that you might even be calling the meeting. So that's why we're looking well into the future. I'm saying 4 weeks out, 8 weeks out, we've already given the date claimer, so people know it's coming. Now, 4 weeks out, we formally call for nominations. So to do that, we've got a lovely little template of a management committee nomination form in the handout section. The reason that we've put that together is because it helps you cover all of your bases. Feel free to update it. So there, for instance, there's an opportunity for any candidates to put a statement about themselves in there. And I think we've nominally put 50 words. If you want to make it 500 words, fine, go knock yourself out. But there are just guidelines around how to do that. To be eligible to be on the management committee, to talk about your legal obligations, there are some things in the Act that you must comply with, and they are then stated on the 3rd page of a 3-page nomination form. So while it makes the form itself a little longer, it means everything's in the one place, and people don't need to go and check the Constitution or the Act to see if they are indeed eligible to be elected to the management committee. And also, it's a good idea to confirm your venue a few weeks out as well. This helps to avoid surprises of double bookings, or if there's wet weather and we plan to have it outside, or people going to the wrong place. But while we're talking about the venue, it's a good time to think about where you want to have your AGM. Do we want to do this at home? Do we want to do this at our home ground? That's perfectly fine. But what about if you actually want to create a nice occasion of your AGM? A bit of an event. You know, we talked about this being ceremonial. Why not create a bit of a ceremony? Go to a nice club somewhere, a nice hotel somewhere, nice venue, and then run your AGM there. Make the place look a bit swish, have your celebration. The tip here, though, is close the AGM before you open the bar. Some of the worst AGMs that I've been through did it the other way around. They opened the bar before they opened the AGM. And by the time we got to the AGM, there were some pretty loose tongues and certainly some interesting decisions made, or in a lot of cases, not made. Now we're only 2 weeks out from the AGM, and here is the point at which we need to actually send the formal notice of the AGM out. Again, to make your life easy, we've got a template for you. The reason that we've put these templates there is because it's when we receive notices of meeting, when we receive nomination forms from organisations that we're helping, we very often see oversights. And so to have a notice of meeting template that you can just read through and say, yes, we need that. No, we don't. If you're not doing any special resolutions, for instance, you can just remove that from the notice. But to be starting from a template each time means that you will make sure that the notice is compliant with your legal obligations as per the Act. So the important thing here, though, is that only the business that is listed on the actual notice of the meeting can be transacted at that meeting. What does that mean? That means that we kind of can't have general business at our meeting, because if we did, then somebody might be indifferent to whether we vote for or against all of the motions that are on the agenda. Yep, don't mind about them. I'm indifferent to whether or not we adopt the new constitution. Yep, happy if we do, happy if we don't. So I've decided not to go. And then somebody brings something important up from general business, and this person would have cared about that. So maybe it's to change the name, for instance, but notwithstanding that's a special resolution, so it has rules of its own. But it's denying those members who aren't there or who have made a deliberate decision not to be there because they don't mind one way or another, even who gets elected. The financials all look fine to me. It's okay. I'm happy not to be there. But then they would have cared. You're denying them their right to actually have a say that is owed to them as a privilege of membership. Your AGM elects your management committee. The management committee is then the leadership of the club, so they should lead. So if you want to engage with members, we suggest don't do it through a general meeting, because general meetings are stuffy and they've got that level of formality and we all don't know how to sit or how to behave. So don't do that. Do meaningful engagement with your members. At this point, at a couple of weeks out, is a good time to send out proxy forms if you have them. So to find out if your club accepts proxies for voting at annual general meetings, the place to go is your constitution. But does it really matter? So now that we have more meetings taking place online, it's actually easier to participate in meetings. I've been to lots and lots of meetings lately where people have literally been walking through the car park to go and sit by the field at a football club on their phone to take part in a meeting. So that means that maybe we don't need them to be able to submit proxies as well. But when it's contentious, whether you've got proxies or whether you don't have proxies, kind of balances itself out anyway. So if your constitution says that we can't have proxies, then neither the yes camp nor the no camp can have proxies. And it's the same if we do. It then comes down to good old-fashioned politicking. So there are 2 types of proxies. There's the first proxy that says, I can't go to the meeting, so I would like Steve to vote on my behalf. And I want Steve to vote on my behalf because I trust him, however he thinks it's appropriate to vote on that motion. So in effect, Steve's then carrying my vote for whatever questions arise. And that includes things like amendments to the wording of motions, so things that can change within the meeting. The second type of proxy says, I want Steve to vote yes to this question, or I want Steve to vote no to this special resolution. So that's very specifically directing the proxy and how to cast your vote. Again, we've got a template for it. So have a look in the resources, have a look at the resources in the handout section, and you'll see that there's a really handy proxy template that divides it in half like that, and it's got clear instructions in it. There is a very light one in the model rules, but it doesn't provide the same level of detail that is included on our template to make your lives easy. Now, remember that 2 weeks out, this is where our nominations are due. So a couple of comments here. If you are going to nominate for a position on the management committee, Why wait until the last minute? A lot of people do this. They leave it right to the last minute thinking, oh, I'll keep it secret. No one will know. The returning officer, whoever that is, even if it is a member and the secretary, and that's a job that Steve and I get to play as outsiders, which means that if we do that, we keep that stuff sealed. Nobody can know until the candidates are announced. So if you're scared about people finding out that you've nominated, then look at the process, because the process should be able to keep that stuff secret. But don't wait until the end then, because then if somebody makes a mistake, say you are receiving the nominations and somebody makes a mistake on their nomination form, therefore it's invalid, send it back and give it, if it's within the 14 days, outside of the 14 days, send it back and give them another chance to let them correct it. Now, the other thing about nominating is if you plan to stand for election, nominate. Follow the process and get a formal nomination in on time, so 2 weeks out. The reason that we say this is all too often we have seen, now I'm just going to pick on presidents randomly. We have seen a president who has, as Steve said somewhere before about a club, has reached the end of its useful life. So this president has reached the end of their usefulness in this club. And everyone is quietly hoping that this person will retire. You thought I was going to say die then, didn't you? They're hoping that this person's going to move on, stand down, because we're sick of them being here. They're holding this club back, and all the young volunteers who say, look, I really want to help. I really want to help. Oh, a grumpy old duck. We want them gone. And then finally, after years of angst, the president says, well, I'm not going to run again. I've had enough. It's time to move on. I think I'll do something else. And then everyone's going, yes, they're rubbing their hands with glee. Then it gets to the actual AGM. And the returning officer, again, whoever it is, says, please thank our outgoing president. Thank you for a wonderful tenure. And everyone goes, yes, that's wonderful. There's a pen and a bottle of wine, and thank you very much. Then they leave their seat and then they go and sit down. And before the returning officer can even call nominations from the floor, the president goes, well, I suppose none of you bastards can do this job, so I'll take it back, and gets back and just sits back in the chair. And everyone goes, what just happened? We were this close and nobody nominated, and now he's back. He or she is back and we can't get rid of him. So if you intend to stand against a dinosaur, stand against him. Put your nomination in and do it properly. So then we get to only 1 week out. At this point, this is the point where we actually publicise who has nominated. So the nominations need to be published at your usual place of meeting or your usual place of operation 7 days out from the AGM. So that says in the old days that we would have put it on a notice board. Again, we don't have to publish these publicly. If you want to put them on your public Facebook page, I suggest that you get permission from everybody before you do. Otherwise, if you have a members only social media profile, social media page, then that's where it's better to go, or a members login page on your website. That's a better place to publish it. Now is also the time to prepare your actual agenda. And now that you've got financials all ready and signed and you know who your candidates are, you can actually put all of the information into the agenda and even send the agenda out to the members who are coming to the meeting. That gives them the chance to see everything that they need to see and prepare questions, particularly on the financial statements. 7 days out is also a good time to be preparing your ballot forms. So if you are going to have a vote, so if there is a contested position, so that means we've got multiple candidates for the one position, that means that we will have a ballot for that position. It's our recommendation that at an AGM, anytime you need to have people voting for and or against other people, then it's a good idea to do that privately. So that means a secret ballot. So the ballot form template that we have in the handout section is really simple. You can fill it in, cut it into 3, and use that, and use this week as a chance to get that prepared. So by the time we get to the AGM, there's no mucking around, everything's ready. We can just initial it as we hand the ballot forms out to the people who are voting, and off we go. Then the final thing to do is the 1 week out reminder. That's when we send the agenda and the financials out, and then schedule a 1 day out reminder as well. So just that last little, hey, just remember the AGM is tomorrow. We're looking forward to seeing you there. So that can be on social media as well. And that can be public if you want, because at that point, it's just the final reminder, see you all tomorrow for the AGM. So then we get to the actual AGM. Now, just to make sure that everyone's still awake and still engaged, I'm going to run one more poll here. And I'm very happy to say that we've given you all of the answers for this one. So the final poll of the evening asks the question, under the updated Associations Incorporation Act, which of the following is not required at your AGM? So we've got electing the management committee, appointing an auditor or an accountant, general business, receiving and adopting the financial statements, disclosing payments made to committee members and senior staff, or none of the above. They're all required. We've got to do all of them. Give you a couple of seconds to do that. Okay, we've got lots and lots of votes coming in for the correct answer. I'm very happy to see. And Steve and I may need to run a remedial class for some others. All right, I think that's enough. Let's show the results now. The correct answer here is general business. So it's not in the Act and you don't need to do it. And I would even suggest it's not a good idea to do it because it can deny people their right to vote on things where they should be allowed to vote. And of course, the last question, the last point there, none of the above, they're all required. That was the trick. So for the 21% of you who fell into my trap. That takes us up to the big day then. So at the AGM, these are the things that we need to do at the actual AGM. So the first thing to do is make people feel comfortable. So if you are on the committee, the outgoing committee as it was, save for there being a big fight or a coup and everyone's a little bit nervous and we're really uncomfortable, if it's a typical AGM where it's just business as usual, go and have fun, go and mingle, go and talk to people. This is a chance to go and interact with people that you may not have seen in a setting that isn't out on a football field. So it's a good chance to go and connect with people, ask some questions and look into the future with them. Reminisce about the year that's just been and look together at the year that's coming. At your AGM, collect an attendance register. So this is really important. Don't try and rely on your memory for who was there or expect that the secretary just knows everyone by sight, first name and last name. So it's a good idea to have a check-in. So if you're not going to use a QR code, which I hope you can all do now, we've again got a nice little resource for you. So it's a very simple check-in sheet that you can use to check people into the AGM. Start the meeting on time, unless everyone's still lining up to register to get in. So let everyone who is present get checked in and then start the meeting on time. Just because Georgina, who is a matriarch of the club and she's been around for years, just because Georgina's running late doesn't mean that we hold up the 20, 30, 40, 50, 100 people who have turned up on time just for Georgina. So start the meeting on time or as soon as everyone who is present is checked in. Be courteous to those who are present. Stick to the agenda. So when running meetings, the chair runs the meeting. So the chair is like the pilot, looking up here, surveying the horizon, making sure that we're keeping this trip safe. The secretary at the same time is then tracking along against the agenda. The agenda is the map. So the secretary is like the navigator, and the secretary and the president or the chair really run the meeting collaboratively. So it's those two that do it, to stick to that agenda as you go through. So the must-haves for the agenda, and you'll see this on our agenda template in the handout section: receiving and adopting the financial statement and the audit report or signed verification statement for the last reportable financial year. Electing the management committee, appointing an auditor or accountant or an approved person to verify our financial statements, and declaring the payments or other benefits made to management committee members or their relatives or any senior staff or their relatives. So notice, of those 4 things that we must do, there's a lot in there about money. There's a lot in there about our financial performance. So it's a really good idea at the AGM to encourage good discussion about the financials. The financial performance of your club is the management committee is accountable for it, and the treasurer is typically responsible for it. But every member should care about it, because it's this stuff that helps us to look into the future. It's our profit that helps us to grow. So invite and encourage a lot of really good and meaningful discussion about the financial statements, partly so that we can look over our shoulder and see how we did last financial year, but more importantly, to discuss how can we use that knowledge from how we did last year to look forward productively into the future. So the other thing that is important to understand is that when we've got the separation between governance and operations, is that our governance people are elected. These are our committee members, but our operational people don't need to be. So they can be appointed. Realistically, Steve and I think that for our head coaches, for our technical directors, these are people who shouldn't be elected popularly. These are the sorts of roles upon which the success of a club can hang. So isn't it better that we have the best person for that job take that job? So again, in the resources tab, we have in there an expression of interest template for you as well. So that we can appoint those people at the AGM, but they certainly don't need to be appointed at the AGM. Maintain order. This is the job of the president, the chair, surveying the horizon and making sure that everything's going on. Now, the secret ballots, if you're having a contested election, these can take some time. So depending on the way that it all falls and whether you've got candidates nominating for multiple positions, you may actually be able to do the vote for 4, 5, 6, or 7 positions all in one go. So there's 7 ballot papers. Please give us your chosen candidate for each of them. So when that happens, have an adjournment to let people go and stretch their legs, grab some refreshments while you go and count the votes. So it just gives everyone who is there a bit of a refresh and a reset, and then come back and reconvene to do the announcements. And finally, allow some time for ceremony. So if you're doing things like the Volunteer of the Year award, Club Person of the Year award, and that happens at your AGM rather than an award ceremony, then allow some time for that celebration and that ceremony. Then that allows you to finish promptly, finish on time, and then get into your socializing. So you don't have to rush away. That's a great time to connect with your members and to then go and create some of those really meaningful relationships as well. Then a week after the AGM, that's a good time to get the minutes done and circulated. Now, if you're using Meeting Track, of course, that's going to be super quick and easy because the agenda becomes the minutes. Tick, 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 and it's all done. Then by a month after the AGM, that's where we have some formal reporting that we need to be able to lodge as well. So 1 month after the AGM is when you need to submit your annual return to the Office of Fair Trading. Make sure that you remember to update the signatories on the club's bank accounts after the AGM as well. And it's a good idea to do this nice and quickly because remember, it's all about the money. So make sure, or 75% of it is all about the money because we've got the election in there as well. So make sure that we take that seriously. After the AGM, it's also a great opportunity to do an induction for incoming committee members and a bit of a governance refresher for the continuing committee members. So the way that we like to think about this is what better time to say, let's have a critical look at how we're going. What's worked well this last year? And let's have a good look at the business. If I was a new CEO that's been inserted into the business to say, how can we get this thing humming? What would I change? Who would I move? What systems would we implement? What would we get rid of? All of these things, it's a really good chance to have that critical look. And so that induction, that refresher, and even a chance to start strategic planning into the future, what better time to do that than pretty much straight away after the AGM. As promised, Steve's now going to give us a quick summary of the differences between incorporated associations and the companies among us.
I'm not going to make the mistake of talking into my muted mic a second time. Yes, so very quickly, for those clubs that are companies limited by guarantee, there are some different requirements for annual reporting and for the annual general meeting process. Your AGM must be held within 5 months of the end of your financial year, whereas incorporated associations, as Michael said, have 6 months. Companies must provide at least 21 days notice for any general meeting, including the AGM. So it's important that companies limited by guarantee recognise that your notice requirements are an extra week on top of incorporated associations. Michael ran through the level 1, 2, and 3 associations. One of the changes through the Act amendments passed last year is also that the names of those association levels are going to change to small, medium, and large. And there are far higher turnover thresholds for companies when it comes to whether you need an audit or not. So if your public company limited by guarantee turns over less than $250,000, you don't even need to do a financial report. Of course, as governance nerds, we would strongly recommend that those companies still indeed get a full audit report. Nevertheless, the legislation is there to provide some flexibility for companies. If your turnover is greater than 250,000 but more than $1 million, more than 250 and less than $1 million, you need a financial report, but it can be reviewed or verified rather than audited. And if you turn over more than $1 million, then you need to get a full audit. Interestingly, so for incorporated associations that have to get their annual return to OFT within 4 weeks, as Michael said, of the AGM date, for companies, your annual review date is actually typically the anniversary of the date on which you were registered as a company. So ASIC will send to you or your company's secretary an annual review form which you need to fill in and provide the updates as to who's been elected to board positions and so on, and get it off to them within 14 days. Some of the other differences for companies, and this is the sort of stuff that we talk through when we're working with clubs, and I know a couple of clubs online tonight are those with whom we've either worked to transition from incorporation to a company structure or have considered that and have decided that the time is not yet right for them. But there's greater flexibility around the composition of your board. So a company can appoint or elect non-members to its board, whereas an incorporated association, to be a member of a management committee, you have to be a member of that association. Also, interestingly, when we go through a constitution review process, for incorporated associations, you get the document adopted by the members, and sometimes that's really easy. Sometimes it takes a while. For companies, that change to your constitution or the adoption of an entirely new constitution takes effect immediately. For incorporated associations, it takes the Office of Fair Trading somewhere between 4 and 6 weeks, if you're lucky, to get your new constitution registered by them. So I will say that the squeaky wheel gets the oil. So if you go through that process and you lodge Form 8, application to register an amendment of rules with OFT, get on the phone, call 13QGov every week and hound them for your new constitution to be registered. So constitutions, the reason that I had a spring in my step, as Michael said earlier today, and for those of you who are online with whom I've worked on constitution reviews will know how much we enjoy this stuff. And often football clubs operate outside the provision of their constitutions, and sometimes this is due to the document being really old. This is probably the most common reason, and the document's outdated and it reflects antiquated practices that are no longer relevant to your club. Sometimes committee members don't want to be restricted in their powers and functions and wish to do as they please, so they operate outside the provision of their constitutions. And sometimes it's simply innocent ignorance. At any rate, it's really important that you as management committee members fully understand your constitution and that you operate according to its provisions. Because if you don't, you'll get called out eventually. Given the changes to the Act last year, now is a really good time for clubs to consider updating their primary governance document. Mostly when we discussed the Act amendments that I ran through earlier with volunteer management committee members, they're quite surprised to hear of the changes. And our expectation is that the proclamations by the Queensland government that will mean that those 2 second round of changes actually take effect over the next 12 months will probably come and go without very much in the way of fanfare. So volunteer committees are therefore likely to continue to operate without proper understanding of what the changes mean for their club. So partly because we love to help make the lives of volunteers easier, but mostly because we're absolute governance nerds, we're really happy to help clubs like all of yours review and rewrite their constitution. We hold your hand through the entire review process, from taking a detailed look at your existing document, drafting the new document, supporting you through the really important process of consulting with your members, and ensuring that their input and feedback is taken on board, so that when you come to the general meeting, whether it be an AGM or a special general meeting called for the purpose, it's likely that it's just a formality for the members to stick their hands up and say, yes, we're happy to adopt that document by special resolution, as Michael mentioned earlier. And we can even lodge the statutory paperwork with OFT within the required timeframes to get it all registered, like I say, when OFT get around to it. The process is a really good opportunity to challenge your governance and operations and kind of throw everything against the wall and move it around and see what sticks. And it's often the case, as Michael will attest, that when we get to the end of a constitution review project, the volunteers with whom we've worked said, "Oh yeah, thanks. This constitution that we've got is great, but it's kind of like a bonus because we've learnt so much through the review process." So the hands-on process that we adopt ensures that by the end of the constitution review, you actually understand what's in the document. So for any of you who are interested and would like to have a chat with one of our team, Michael or I are really happy to pass your details on or to get onto you ourselves. Put your number in the chat and we'll be happy to give you a call in the next couple of days and talk about constitution review for the club. And like I say, the timing is certainly right to ensure that you're taking account of all of the changes to the legislation that are rolling out.
Great stuff. Thanks, Steve. So that leaves us with the goodies. So the takeaways from this evening, we have 10 of them for you tonight. So the summary that Steve took you through about the changes to the Act that came into effect from last year, this year, and into next year are all summarised in a nice, neat little one-pager in there for you as well. As I mentioned, there's also the list of how to do everything. So that step-by-step guide for how to prepare, how to run, and then how to follow on from your AGM is there in a neat little fact sheet. We have the notice of meeting template. We have a proxy form template. We have the operational position expression of interest form template, remembering that you don't have to vote those in. They are typically for appointment, often for appointment by the management committee, even after the AGM. We've also got the management committee nomination form template there that has that third page that says, and you know how it says you've got to comply with these relevant sections of the Act? Well, here they are. Make sure that when you tick, yes, I confirm that I am eligible, you are eligible against each one of those things from the Act. We've then got agenda and minute keeping templates, and those are if you're not using software like Meeting Track to set up your agenda and keep your minutes, then there are templates there. And as Steve just mentioned about the constitution review process, some of the great feedback that we've had from those templates is not about them just having the dot points and the numbers in there. It's the fact that they're populated with additional information. So if you have a look at the minute keeping template, for instance, it's got wording for each of the motions. The one that I like to talk about is somebody says, would somebody move the minutes? They say, well, here are the minutes. There we go. I moved them. That's not what that means. It means we're moving that the minutes be accepted as a true and correct record of the proceedings of that last meeting. So those templates actually serve as an ongoing reminder and an ongoing education tool for you as well. Finally, there's the attendance register for on the day and the ballot paper template as well. So that leads us to the end of this evening's session. And as you can tell, both Steve and I absolutely love this. Steve really does enjoy his constitutions and his legal reviews and his AGMs. But the reason that we do this is that we like to make the lives of volunteers better. Too many volunteers end up getting burdened or overworked or even burnt out by taking on or accepting positions that they don't feel that they can define. So by going through this process and even to be nominated for a position, what better time than any other to say, I'm happy and privileged to accept this nomination for the position of, let's call it president. However, my understanding is that the position of president would chair the meetings and be the club's ambassador. So if during my tenure as president of this association or this club, you ask me to do something that falls outside of that purview, please understand that I will say no. Because if I say yes to what you ask and yes to everyone else, then I'll be doing all of those things and I won't get to do my job, which is these two things. However, when it comes time to going and meeting with council for a lease renewal, to meeting with Football Queensland, to be looking at our opportunities for growth and for moving successfully into the future, that's my job. So when somebody then goes to that person, they have already empowered themselves to be able to politely say, what a great idea, recognizing that I can't take it on because my role is really important. How can we make sure that this happens? And what role can you play in making sure that this happens? If you haven't already registered for our upcoming webinars, the next one is in 3 weeks. And as we said, it's one of our favorite. If you thought we enjoyed AGMs and legal stuff, then wait until you get to hear us talk about money and budgets and all the things that make the not-for-profit business hum. So that's 3 weeks away. And then the others coming up there as well. So to register for those, head to cprgroup.com.au/FQ webinars 2021 and register for any that you haven't already. We would really love you all to sign up to our newsletter as well. So you can do that on our homepage at cprgroup.com.au and just scroll to the bottom and there's a little sign up button there. Now, the reason that that's a good idea is that Steve and I don't know everything, but we love learning. When we find something new, we share it. So we will share that as a tip. We will share that on social media. We will share that in our newsletter. We'll share that in our podcast. So to get access to the stuff that we learn from others, and to be honest, some of it is so tragic it becomes comedic, and so it's really worth following along there. So follow us where you can, and of course, if you want to give us a phone call, 1-800-100-204, and that'll get us on the good old-fashioned phone. So
I'll just quickly jump in there. Yeah, we've got a couple of good questions come in that I promised that we'd come to at the end of the session. So anyone who needs to shoot off, certainly feel free to do so, and we'll talk through responses to a couple of the questions that have come in. First one relating to remuneration declaration at the AGM, and a question from Andrea. Does this include payments to a company owned by a management committee member for work undertaken at the club? The Amendment Act is not really clear on that specific point, but what I will say is that a disclosure of material personal interests would be required in this instance. So often we do see a management committee member who also owns a company that delivers some service that the club needs. And if that's the case, the management committee member in question, given that they a shareholder or the owner of that company, they would declare a material personal interest and would take no part in the discussion, debate or decision making in relation to the question to potentially engage their own company to receive the services. So and again, there's greater clarity around that particular point added into the Act from the changes approved last year. So failing to declare a material personal interest attracts a fine of not 20 penalty units, but 60. So that's a little over $8,000. So quite a significant fine for failing to make that declaration if it's necessary.
One of the things that we've done to make it easy for you to remember to do that is in each of our agenda templates, it has declaration of interests. In each of the templates that are already there for management committee meetings and general meetings in Meeting Track, it's already there to remind you of how important this is. 60 penalty units is ouch.
It certainly is, yeah. Okay, I'll just come back to one of the other questions that was asked. Okay. I'm just going to find, it's in a private chat. One question's come in from Carla. What suggestion do you have if a role doesn't have nominations for that role? Michael, I might hand to you on that while I go and find. So if there are no nominations that have come in for a particular role in the lead up to an AGM, what should we do about that?
Yeah, that's a great question. Now, the short answer is it depends on what it says in your constitution, but assuming your constitution is either silent on it or it's a standard clause, that means that you get to the part of the AGM where you reach the elections and then you call nominations from the floor. So this is where a constitution needs to have a fairly good degree of specificity in it. Because if you come up against problems like this at the AGM and nobody knows how to deal with it, guess where you're going to go? Guess where members are going to go looking for the answers to your constitution? So that's why it's important that the parts of the constitution where people will go looking for answers should have a bit more detail in them. So while the model rules is great in that it means that you are perfectly consistent and compliant with the Act, it can leave you lacking or floundering a little bit in cases like this. So if you've had the situation arise more than once, and it's certainly a good flag for getting that sorted out. But if it's standard or if it's not mentioned in there at all, then you declare that there have been no candidates no candidates nominated for that position, and you then call for nominations from the floor. So anyone who is there can nominate any eligible member. The eligible member nominated does not need to be in attendance. It would, of course, be good practice for that member to agree that, yes, I'd be happy to take that on. So they can do that on the phone, or they may have already let you know beforehand. But don't drop people in it. So, you get home and, oh, darling, how was the AGM? Oh, it was good. By the way, your treasurer. So you don't want to do those sorts of things and dump people in the deep end.
Very good. Next question was from Michelle, who correctly pointed out that companies limited by guarantee do indeed have 28 days to register any changes to office holder details. So thanks for pointing that out. And she has asked the question in relation to overdue financial statements and annual returns. So it turned out that when Michelle and others took over the club, that sounds a little bit combative, doesn't it? When they took on the management committee roles, it turned out that an audit had not been completed for the past 2 years. This is now done. Do we need to have a special general meeting to present and pass these reports? Not necessarily. You don't need to have a special general meeting. If your AGM is coming up anyway, you could technically, in separate resolutions, pass or accept those financial statements at the one meeting, at the one AGM. If you wanted to get them done prior to the AGM, you could certainly call a special general meeting for that purpose. You'll then need to submit, as you're probably aware, with the Office of Fair Trading, annual returns for the past couple of years as well, because you'll be likely overdue with the Office of Fair Trading. Interestingly, Michelle made the comment that their auditor would not do a verification statement, even though they're definitely level 2. And I reckon good on the auditor for playing hardball on that and saying the only thing that he or she would do is a full audit. So
And they
not a
basically have
surprise.
to do the same level of analysis anyway, and then that's why if it's going to cost the same amount of time, we might as well do the full audit.
That's exactly right. Yeah.
Hmm.
Very good. And okay, I think that was just about, I'd answered a couple more already in there, so that seems fine. So if you were jumping over to that meeting track demo, I'll just find the one. Oh, okay. The final question, just quickly, related to grievance and mediation procedures. So if you're interested in if you're interested in finding exactly what the Amendment Act says about what your constitution will need to include by way of grievance procedure, simply Google Associations, Incorporation and Other Legislation Amendment Act 2020 and look
Simply.
for simply, yes, you might get RSI in doing so. And it's section 47A, grievance procedure. Have a look in there. You'll see the requirements for the grievance procedure itself. And in terms of standard mediation rules or procedures, if a simple Google will find some resources on that. Of course, where we work with clubs to do the constitution review, we write all that stuff in so that the constitution continues to comply beyond 30 June next year. So another good question there from a couple of participants. And I'll now hand over to you, Michael.
Thank you. So thank you very much for everyone who may need to take off now. As I mentioned before, some of you have already got some demos scheduled in on your own, so that's fine. You can join us for those. If you'd like to have a demo or schedule something with us as well, just drop us a line on via our website or at info@cprgroup.com.au. So now it is my pleasure and my privilege to walk you through Meeting Track. To give you a quick background to why we developed Meeting Track, you've just seen it. So what we realized is that we had been pushing and pushing our Word templates, and we had tried some other platforms instead of Word for those templates to work. And we found that we could push them no further. While a Word template is handy, it doesn't do the work for you. So it doesn't do the reminders. It doesn't automatically send an email to somebody when we assign them a task. It doesn't give us a simple way to follow up on all of the things that we wrote in our minutes from the last meeting. How do we go and check those without then having to have a whole heap of paperwork? It also means, being cloud-based software, that there is only one version of the agenda and only one version of the minutes. If I send it to you, that's a copy. How do we know? Because you didn't log in and see it in the actual copy. So when you go to meetingtrack.com.au, if you haven't already set up an account, just click on the free trial button here and register there. It's really simple to register. When you do register, it won't let you do anything though until you try and set up a meeting, and then it'll say, oh, tell me about your organization, so that you can actually put your organization name in, so that it will automatically populate the agenda and the minutes with that name. So I have set up a little club admin account here, so I'm going to log straight into that. So club admin, there we go, and log in. So once I log in, it's going to take me to a fairly simple dashboard. So here in our scheduled meetings, I can see all of the meetings that I've got scheduled coming up. So there's also a calendar view if I want to look at what that would look like and see the meetings that are coming up on each date in the calendar. But either way, and the dashboard view then creates a little snapshot in there as well. So when you start, you'll also have nobody in the system. So the people who go into the system are called our members, our meeting track members. And so you can see I've got some good friends in here, Neil, Alan, Virgil, and yes, these are astronauts, not Thunderbirds. And of course, Dr. Claw, because I am Inspector Gadget. So we've got to have a Dr. Claw there. It's good to have a villain in every club. So now you can simply add new members by clicking the add button, first name, last name, and pop their email in, and any details that you want to record in the system as well. Of course, if you've got lots of people and you'd prefer to do that all in one go, then just click on the import tab here, download the template to begin with. It's literally a 4-column Excel spreadsheet, and you fill that in. So I will just choose a file off my desktop, which I've already done to import my members here. So I'll select this one here, and there it is. So there's my members list, and I simply click import. So that's the list that I use, and literally to get these 9 people in took me as long as it took to type those email addresses. It's certainly very quick to be able to do that. So once I've got my members in there, then from anywhere, I can go and click a new meeting. But before I do, I want to go and check out my templates, because as you've just seen, we've got our templates. And I've shared those with you for the AGM tonight, and we shared them with you for the management committee meeting agenda and minutes last time. In Meeting Track, though, you can have your own template. So if you want to start with ours, but then make it your own, this is how you do that. Simply go to the Settings tab here, and this is where we've put our club name in there. So the settings right down the bottom, if you want to update your logo so that it will show your logo rather than the Meeting Track logo on your minutes, you can. And then here are our templates. So there's 4 in there as standard, but you can create a custom meeting template as well. So if you want to create a custom meeting template that is as simple as meeting open, what did we discuss? Meeting close, you can do that. It's that easy. But in here, I've got templates for management committee meetings and general meetings. We'll see the general meeting one in a moment because I'll set that up for you. But the template for the management committee meeting agenda is that simple. You can see there, as we mentioned before, we've got the declaration of interests showing up here too. So there's 11 things in there. But what's not here is, for instance, how I mentioned that every application for membership needs to be considered by the management committee. So if you want that to be in your template, it's simply a matter of either seeing it here. So it is a standard item over here. So I can just click plus, and that will move it from over there to here. And I want to do that after the treasurer's report each time. So I've added it, dragged it, I've dropped it, and I've saved it. And that is it. That's my template. If I want to add a new, if I want to rename this here, because we have a board, not a management committee, then it's now our board meeting. If I want to add a new agenda item that isn't here, I can simply click new item, and this new agenda item might be gaming reporting, for instance. So I'll simply add that in there. And we want to again do that after the treasurer's report before we consider the admission or rejection of membership applications. That will now be there every time I start a board meeting from the board meeting template, a board meeting agenda from the agenda template. Those items are now going to be there every single time. So, like I said, pretty much from anywhere we can start a new meeting. So I will, however, go back to our homepage. And from here, we're going to start our agenda for our AGM. So the reason that we've got different templates and exactly the same in our Word documents as in Meeting Track is there are things that we do at the AGM that we don't do at a committee or a board meeting. And there are things that we do at board meetings that we don't do at the AGM. So we're going to start here with our AGM. So we'll start with a template there. This will be our 2021 AGM. We're going to have this in our own clubhouse, and it's not a repeating meeting. So this meeting's coming up Saturday fortnight, so Saturday the 24th, and it's going to be at 10 in the morning, and that will finish at 11 in the morning. So we can scroll through these numbers here or jump up and down. So we're going to allow an hour for our AGM at the clubhouse, Saturday fortnight. Then once it's done, I just click next, and that takes me into the agenda itself. So in exactly the same way as before we had the agenda template set up, this agenda has now been generated based exclusively on that template. So the first thing that we need to do is determine who is going to be there. So we've had these people all agree that they're going to come. Dr. Claw and Penny are both coming. Brains is coming. Okay, Brains is from the Thunderbirds. Then John Glenn's coming. Gordon Cooper's coming. Buzz Aldrin said he couldn't make it because he didn't want to be in the same room as Neil Armstrong. So there we go. We'll also add Gus Grissom as well. And we better put Alan Shepard in too, because he was administrator of NASA for a little while. There we go. So we've got our expected attendees. The meeting will open at 10 a.m. So once we've got that ready to go, and we can just click through each of these agenda items like that. So the attendance and apologies, anything else that we need to note there, remembering that it's up the top, but that's just a standing agenda item, as is our declaration of interests, as is our minutes of our previous annual general meeting. So when we get to actually running the meeting, I'll show you how exciting these are and everything else that's there. The only thing that we don't have here already, because we need to add it to our template, is what Steve talked about in declaring any financial rewards or any other payments or any other benefits provided to committee members or senior staff. So because that is a new agenda item, I'm simply going to click add agenda item, and a new agenda item will nicely pop up down the bottom here. So this will be declaration of payments made to committee and staff. And then I don't really want that down there. I want that up with the treasurer's report. So there we go. Oh, put it in. Let's do it after the appointment of the auditor. Done. Drag and drop. Simple as that. So once we've got all of this set, and we may have some important things here. So let's say that somebody has said, let's change our club's name. That would be a special resolution. So I can again add another agenda item in here. And I'm going to add the agenda item in at the bottom as a special resolution. Change of name. Now, because I already know the wording of this, obviously it's not going to be the last thing that we do, but we will do this after the election of office bearers. So because we already know the wording of the resolution that's going to happen here, I'm actually going to add that wording in as the motion already. So the motion will be, what are we going to call it? To ABCFC Inc. There we go. So any notes that we want to include in there, we can. And because Neil has moved that, we'll put him in as the mover already. And because all we're doing now is setting up the agenda, that motion will be pending, and I'll click save. Now that motion is already going to show up here as ready to go onto the agenda. Now, because Steve's here, I'll also say if we're going to do that, there's going to need to be another one that the club secretary I'll let Steve wordsmith my wording there, but we'll actually move a resolution that the secretary be authorised to lodge the relevant paperwork. And that's also then, we'll let Alan move that one as well. So that's pending. So those are the two motions that are now ready to roll on the agenda. And that's it. Our agenda is done. So at this point, I'm going to I can send the agenda straight from here, or I'm going to preview the agenda. So I'll click preview here because then I'll send it out from there. And we can see that everything that we need to know is already there. If I had put some notes there, if we had some attachments, then there would also be attachments there. That simply shows up as a little orange download link. So rather than attaching it, anyone who's got access to this agenda can also see the attachments. For instance, the best place to do that would be the treasurer's report here. So to actually have the financial statements here ready to go out with the agenda, and we don't need to send those because we can do it straight from here. So we're going to send that to all of the members in the system. Here's the agenda. Done. Send now. So that will now send the email with that as an attachment to all of the people who are ticked in this list. So I can send it to none, I can send it just to me, I can send it to the members who are listed in there, I can send it to everyone. So that's gone. If I now jump over and check out what's in Neil Armstrong's email here, notice his address, first on the moon. There we go. Here is the email. So this is what it looks like as it comes into his inbox. There's a nicely formatted HTML version straight in the email. So you don't have to even click on a link or an attachment to see that. But if there were any links, they'd show up in here nicely as well. So that is it. Now in our scheduled meetings, we see that we have the AGM. So now we're going to jump forward in time. It's now the 24th of July. So we're going to actually run our meetings. I'm going to view the agenda items here, and that will take us here. When I'm ready to turn these from an agenda into the minutes, I simply click convert to minutes. What that now does is it now locks that agenda and says, right, that's the agenda. So now we've sent the agenda, that's it. We're now working on the minutes. So the meeting will now show up in meeting history because we've converted it to minutes. I'd like to go and edit those now though. So you can either click convert to minutes at the start, or you can do that at the very end of the meeting. So from here, now we can actually run the meeting, and I want to show you how easy it is to run this meeting. So are we going to allow Dr. Claw to chair the meeting? Okay, Dr. Claw opened the meeting, welcomed everyone, and acknowledgement of country. There we go. Please forgive my terrible spelling. And that's it. Move on. Attendance and apologies. Right, now what's important here is that we've already got all of our attendees up here. Sorry, I forgot to click that. Yes, we have a quorum. But in here, what we can actually do is remember, just because it's got this motion button, Meeting Track serves as a great reminder tool. The motion wording here is that the attendance record be received and a leave of absence be granted to any apologies. So the chair simply calls for somebody to move that motion. John Glenn moved it, Gus seconded it, the motion was carried. Done, recorded, that's it. Move on. Declarations of interest. Does anyone have any interest that they need to declare? None declared. Next. Minutes of the previous annual general meeting. So from here, again, let's have a look at what the motion is. Would somebody like to move that the minutes of the previous annual general meeting be confirmed as a true and accurate record? Note any amendments in here. Who moved that? Neil moved it and Gordon seconded it, and it was carried. Save. Done. Motion added. It's that simple. Then we've got the business arising. Again, because it's on the agenda, we remember to do that. Now, what's great about this tool is that there's this little button here that allows me to bring in the business from the previous meeting. So rather than having to go and check last year's agenda and last year's minutes, if I click this button, I can select any previous meeting that is already there, and I can scroll through the list here to the last AGM and select that meeting, and then all of the tasks and motions from that meeting come straight in as tasks and motion under business arising. So if there's a task in there and it's still pending, right from here, we can mark that task as complete. So that's a really handy tool that allows us, that makes life easy for us. The president's report, again, this is the sort of thing where we should have an attachment. Now, if the president does have it, obviously our preference would always be to have written reports. We can simply drag and drop a file right here. If we've already uploaded the file into our files menu over here on the left-hand menu, then we can select that from the list here. But it's a great way to not only have that file in the system, but also connect it exactly where it needs to go to both the agenda and the minutes. Again, what's the wording of the motion here? That the president's report be adopted. So Brains is going to be the president here, and John seconded it. It was carried. There we go. Save. Again, simple as that. What's next? Treasurer's report. Okay, again, we've got the attachment. So let's attach the treasurer's report and the audit report and the financial statement there. What's the motion? That the treasurer's report and annual financial statement for the /21 financial year be received and adopted. So I don't remember who our treasurer is, but let's let Gus Grissom move it and Al can second it. And obviously, great questions were asked and answered because they're doing everything right. There we go. Save. Next, appointment of auditor. What's the motion here? That auditors be appointed as the auditor for the, and this will be the 2021/22 financial year, and they are our auditor, so I can adjust the wording there. There we go. Moved, seconded. Those in favour, those against, the ayes have it, carried, passed. Then we continue with our declaration of payments made to staff. We didn't have any this year. That's it. Move on to the next one. Subcommittee and other reports. Details in here. Again, what are the motions in here? That subcommittee reports and other reports be adopted. So if we want to do those all in one go, the motion wording is all there, ready to go. Moved, seconded, carried. Next, election of office bearers. Right, so here is where we can put in all of the details of those people nominated and those elected. What I would do here is use motions to say election of office bearers that elected president, and we can go and do the same thing. Moved. So we spoke before about nominators and seconders as per the Constitution. Nominated details, seconder details. Those in, oh, Ed Buzz is not there, so he can't move it, can he? Gadget, carried, and save. Now just note though, notice that I could still select Buzz, even though he's not there, because Buzz could have still moved a motion to put it on the agenda. Somebody would then be able to overwrite that when we then go to change it. So here we open this up, and the club changing its name that we put on the agenda is already here. All we need to do is go and open that. So I could have actually pre-prepared those motions that we knew were coming, like the appointment of the auditor, because we knew who that was, like the treasurer's report, we knew who that was, like the president's report, we knew who that was. So for the, what have I been here, about 13 minutes now, and I'm talking as I go, so I'm probably going a bit slow. The whole thing is done, it's prepared. So it's designed to save time. So we have all of our discussion details in here. And Neil moved it, Inspector Gadget seconded it, and we've had that carried by special resolution, which means a 75% majority, if you remember from your Constitution reading days. Save and done. So then we've also had this one, it was moved by Al, seconded by Dr. Claw, and carried. There we go, save. Now, because we've got some work to do now, I'm going to add a task. So we can add tasks anywhere we like, but there's an important task here to go and lodge paperwork. And that's a job that we're going to assign to Neil Armstrong. There's Neil. So we'll leave Neil. If you like, I can actually put multiple people onto the same task. But this is easy enough, so we're just going to leave that one for Neil on his own. And he's got to get that done by, let's say, next Friday. Oh, sorry, on the 21st. So we'll give him the Friday the 30th. Save. There we go. Task added successfully. Now, straight away, if I jump back over to Neil's inbox over here and refresh, we'll see that Neil has been added a task. New task assigned. Hi, Neil Armstrong. A new task has been assigned to you. There we go. So there's all of the details it's all of the details that we need in here. Go and lodge paperwork due on the 30th of the 7th. When you've completed the task, meeting track admin can update the task status to complete. So as soon as that's done, we can simply mark that as complete and it's done. If I go and edit this task and say new info in here and click save again, it's going to ask, do I want to resend the email? So if I've made any significant changes in here, I can select yes, and then that will resend that email. Otherwise, if there's nothing significant there, then we don't need to worry. And because we've now reached the end of the meeting, we actually finished at 10:30, I'll say 10:35, done. And that's it, meeting closed. So now I'm going to preview what the minutes look like now. And that's it, complete. These are the minutes, nicely formatted, who moved it, who seconded it, whether it was carried, whether it was lost. There's our motion there, who moved it, who seconded it, carried, motion detail, motion detail. Scroll down here to our task detail, go and lodge paperwork. There's some new info. Neil needs to do it by the 1st of August. And then we mark that one as complete. That's it. I forgot to make a note there of who actually closed the meeting, so I could go back and edit that, which I will do. So I'll show you how I'll go and do that now, because I didn't quite finish it off. So I'll go and click that. Next, and scroll right to, gotta remember who opened the meeting. Dr. Claw opened the meeting. So Dr. Claw closed the meeting as well. Done. Now, sorry, go back to have a look at the meeting history here. So if I want to send that out again, all I need to do is click send the minutes. And again, I get the same options here. Do I want to send it to everyone who was in attendance? Do I want to send it to everyone? Do I just want to send it to me? Or do I want to send it to those that I select? Here are the minutes. Send now. Now, the reason that you'll see this says loading here, the reason that it's then goes back to say I can send those again is I might want to send it multiple times from here. So I might want to put a different message to different people and then click send now. And so that I've got the ability to do that as we're tracking along. The final step now is next year. When we jump ahead, when you read in your constitution, it says the minutes of the management committee meeting need to be signed by the president of the meeting or the president of the next meeting. The minutes of the AGM need to be signed by the minutes of that meeting or the minutes of the next one after they've been approved. So we know we had item number, what was it, 4, that the minutes of the previous meeting be accepted as a true and correct record. Once that's done, we can now sign the minutes. It says that the minutes need to be signed and then stored in the minute book. Well, watch me sign these minutes. I am Dr. Claw, and I confirm that I'm the chair of the meeting or the subsequent meeting where they were confirmed, and that the minutes are a true and accurate record of the proceedings. Done. Those minutes are now verified. So if I preview those minutes, they will now be complete and verified, and Meeting Track is our minute book. It's an electronic minute book, and there is our verification down the bottom, the last step. As you can see, I really enjoy a good opportunity to talk through software.
You enjoy
like.
You enjoy Meeting Track as much as I enjoy constitutions.
I think so. So I hope that that's covered off on a lot of the questions that people may have. But Steve, did I miss anything while I was going through there? Any good questions
No.
you want to go through?
Oh, sorry. Yes, you've missed a few good questions, some of which I've typed out some answers to. One good question from Theon that's come in the last moment. If a president or chairperson changes at the vote, should the outgoing remain the chair for the remainder of the AGM?
Yeah, it's a really good question. We say that typically we would say yes. The best bet is that the outgoing committee actually stay on until the close of the meeting. So the incoming committee take up the mantle for the next meeting. The reason that that's important is that there may be questions that arise depending on when in the agenda you've got your elections. There might be questions that come up about the financials, for instance. And if the treasurer has stood down or been voted out, then the new treasurer won't have the answers to those questions. So it's best for continue with the status quo until the close of that meeting.
One more good question. Technicality in Meeting Track from Damien. As a club with 700 plus members, would we need to re-upload all of those members into the system each year?
Great question. No, definitely not. You could. I wouldn't. I definitely wouldn't. I suggest that what you do is you limit the members of Meeting Track to the members of your committee. So if you want to then send the minutes or the agenda and the minutes to everybody, and there's too many, then you can fit, and then you're managing multiple databases, and that's never any fun. So if you have the database as the membership register in Meeting Track as your committee members, then once I, as the administrator here, and I'm Inspector Gadget logged in at the moment, I download a copy as a PDF, and then I simply attach that and send that to our membership database. So that's the easiest way to do it.
Awesome. And that's it.
Wonderful. That is great. Thank you, everybody.
Some really good questions.
Yeah, and thank you, everybody, for the opportunity to do that little presentation. If you'd like to know more, go and set up an account. Go and have some fun. It really is that easy. It has been a real journey to get here, obviously, as these things are. And my my passion for Meeting Track is matched only by my naivety in thinking how quick we'd be able to get this done. So it was great fun to be able to get it to this point. But we are working literally every day on updates. So we've got some really exciting things coming for Meeting Track, including the ability to have sub accounts that are subcommittees underneath the main account. So we've got some great things coming up. Some of these will roll out fairly quickly, but there's a development plan that takes us at least a year into the future. So once you've subscribed, all of the new features just come straight into your account as you go. Steve, thanks again for joining me on this journey this evening. It's been great fun. And thank you everyone for joining us. And we look forward very much to seeing you all again in another 3 weeks. So we'll see you then.
Absolutely. Cheers. Good night, everybody.
Good night.